This channel is made possible by viewers like you. My viewers, subscribers, and patrons greatly help to keep this channel going. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of you. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, please check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you'll get access to what I'm working on, previews of upcoming content, and even early videos, along with other tier options for those that are interested. Thank you, and now on to the video. Exoprimal is a title that many have called weird, and I would agree that it is in many ways. And for the most part, it is a good kind of weird. It's another service-type title with always online play. I think the story execution, while entertaining, could have benefited from being more focused, but with its attempt to have a setting and world that pretty much tries to incorporate everything from dinosaurs to time travel, it honestly comes across as unique and charmingly weird. But more importantly, Exoprimal delivers a fun experience that I think might surprise you, even if you are a bit hesitant on trying a live service type of game. It's a title that I found myself returning back to a couple nights a week, having an enjoyable time even playing with random people. And best of all, it's on Game Pass, and honestly is a prime example of a really good Game Pass game. Exoprimal pretty much features just one mode. You are part of a team of 5 trying to complete your objectives as fast as possible. You are dropped into a map and tasked with eliminating hordes of dinosaurs. Sometimes you need to take out a set number of different types, fight a boss, defend a position, among other objectives. The first set of objectives are pretty quick, and for the most part, increasingly get harder as you go along. It is impressive the amount of dinos that can be seen on screen at some points. It can feel like they are flooding the area. The larger, more boss-like encounters are a bit more spongy, but not to the point of them feeling grindy. The battles are generally fairly brisk, and there really isn't time to smell the roses or explore for stuff on the maps. Exoprimal is very focused on pushing you to the next bit of combat. It's all about the action. What is cool is that while you are completing your objectives, you'll occasionally see the opposing team on what they are doing. You cannot interact with them at this point, but this sort of helps to build up the next area of the match. So after completing a few objectives, your team is then thrown into a new area. But now the action shifts from being just PvE to also being PvP. Now you will need to complete your objectives, deal with all the AI dinosaurs, along with the human opponents as well. This infusion of PvP with the PvE creates an interesting and compelling dynamic that feels like the action is being flipped on its head and keeps you on your toes. Don't get me wrong, the horde type co-op shooting action is really fun and hits that mindless action sweet spot, but the PvP aspect to this has you considering everything much differently, because now you need to outmaneuver and outsmart human opponents. When I first started playing the game, I did find this area interesting, but I preferred the more co-op action side of it. Now that I have played the PvP more, I'm really appreciating how that mixes in and what it brings to the table for the players. One of the biggest positives that Exoprimal has going for it is the use of the suits. So there are 3 different classes: Assault, Tank, and Support. Within these classes are different suits for you to use. It's important to know that each one of the suits, even within the same class, play very differently from each other. For example, the default option Deadeye is your machine gunner, whereas the Zephyr is all melee focused and about being right into the thick of the action. Each one of these classes have different base weapons, cooldowns, and even fun mods to equip. Now, if you were just starting out, I would suggest 2 things. One, I would play a few matches as the default Deadeye class, get your bearings on how the game operates, and feel more comfortable with the systems here. Then I would take the time and start experimenting with the different classes. Exoprimal does a really good job at allowing the player to experiment, along with providing a little something for almost every type of player. One feature I really like is how mid-match you can switch your suit at any time. This means that if you're trying one out and you're not really feeling how it operates, you can switch to another. What I liked about this is that it creates an environment that encourages the player to try something new while also having the option to go back to an old favorite that you're more comfortable with. Along with this, it helps your 5-man team if you're having some variety of the different classes. Like, you're going to want at least one support and tank mixed into your team. The game will even tell you that your team is lacking in a certain class area, which is an appreciated feature because mixed in with being able to change your suits on the fly, this means that you can readjust how you contribute or work with your team. For example, you might be at a tough spot where you need a healer, and you could switch to that, or maybe you need to be in a situation where you need a tank. The switching allows the player to pivot for many reasons, and it helps to keep the action dynamic and allow the player to adapt even more on the fly, along with trying out and using the different suits. Now, I sort of mentioned this before, but if you don't want to play with the PvP end area, you can opt to just play the game exclusively with co-op. This means that the final part of the match has harder objectives that you're going to need to do with your team. And as a horde shooter, this is very fun. The PvP does add a dynamic element that greatly keeps things interesting, but know that this game is just as fun just blasting away at dinos. Exoprimal does a pretty good job with the progression, especially for being a live service game. It doesn't really feel like a grind, but rather it feels like there is a lot to unlock and obtain. But I always walked away from each match with something, and it felt like it was worth my time. You're gaining experience for almost everything, from individually leveling up the suits to increasing your profile level and even working through the battle pass for more skins. I know that there has been much discussion on the day one releases that come to Game Pass. Sometimes we see games that are released on there that feel thrown together and put on there just to say that there's something new to play. And to Microsoft's credit, there have been titles that have been released on Game Pass that are of good quality, really strengthening the service. Exoprimal, I think, is one of those good ones. For one, it is a surprise that it turned out as fun as it did. I honestly didn't know what to think going in. Initially, I thought it was going to be an EDF mixed with dinosaurs, and while that is semi-true in some areas, it is completely its own thing. I also think that because of the game's weirdness, that Game Pass is probably going to help Exoprimal as well. I don't know how lively the community would have been for this game without Game Pass. What I like about this service is being able to try many different games and potentially find some that I may have missed. By putting this on Game Pass, the game is in all the members' hands right out of the gate, and this definitely must have helped the player count numbers at its launch. Plus, I think there are some players who were like, you know, I have Game Pass, let me try this new game out, and then found out that they ended up liking it. My point with this is that sometimes we get a release that both benefits the game being on Game Pass and benefits Game Pass by being on there. One last thing I want to mention was that Exoprimal is a game that is honestly not afraid to be a game. It is wacky, silly, and the setting and story-wise has a mess of things going on. But it also has a mixture that honestly fits the video game medium well, especially one that I remember growing up with. Nowadays, we see serious narratives. Many of them come across as pretentious garbage. So when we get a title like, say, Dead Island 2 or Exoprimal, and it just brings the entertainment and fun, I want to stop and praise that type of stuff. If you're on the fence and have Game Pass, give this a try, especially if you have some friends to play with. And if you don't, just give this a try anyway. The game does a good job of pushing the player into always playing for the objectives, which forces the team to act like a team even if they're not all on mic. I think Exoprimal is a good example of the perfect Game Pass game, something that we honestly didn't know if it would be good. Put on a service where we can try it out, and it turns out to be really fun. Have you played Exoprimal? What are your thoughts on it? What are other examples of good Game Pass games? Let me know all of this in the comments down below.